So with that in mind,
Yes.
your number one wrestling story of the year via Uprocks is WWE merges with UFC to form TKO.
Yeah, this is not only the biggest story of the year, this is the biggest story in a few decades. WWE has been such a force in wrestling. Like Vince McMahon's 80s sort of colonial conquest of professional wrestling has forever shaped the landscape. He comes into the territory system and says, yeah, I'm just going to go up and I'm going to either buy out these territories or I'm going to run them out of business and I'm going to take my product national. He does this, gets into the last bastion of hope for the non-WWE wrestling was Ted Turner. Ted Turner fights back, eventually gets conked out. There's 20 years of Vince just ruling his roost with no competition. And now for the first time in 40 years, we are existing in a professional wrestling landscape that is not molded by Vince McMahon. It's the biggest shift in wrestling history for like the last since Vince did his conquest. This is the biggest thing since that. And yeah, it's crazy.
It's one of those things that was probably difficult to fathom, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even when the scandals and stuff broke. We're always like, yeah, he's gonna figure out a way to get out of it. Like, he's Vince. And we never thought that it would result in something like this. You'd always heard it was almost like a veiled threat. Every time, like almost like a, hey, we could go, that he could one day sell this. Like, hey, if you don't appreciate me, I could turn this over to someone who doesn't love it that much, and then to see it happen.
Yeah.
It was definitely like one of those things. It just was, it was astonishing. It was incredible. Well, it took a while to get used to. And, now it's like, okay, the mustache can fade into the darkness for me. But, it's like nothing. It is seismic. Nothing is the same anymore. Period.
It's weird how the mustache, the growing of the mustache and the dyeing of the hair represents a real era change in WWE and Vince's life. And it's like we're now post mustache. We are in 2 p.m. That's if you want to count the years. This is 2 p.m. post mustache.
Is it? Was it really?
Well, okay, because he kind of went out in 2022, so it depends. Because he goes out summer of 2022, he retires, but then he came back on January 6th, 2023. So and and then he's out again. So in June, I would consider it around 2 years. But it's like you were saying, for so long, it felt like you couldn't imagine what WWE would be like without Vince McMahon. And then when we got it for those 6 months of Triple H, I remember just thinking, this is great.
Yeah, this is way better.
Like, this is fantastic, because he's just using the Vince McMahon playbook, but with a few tweaks. So it's not aggravating to you, and you can tell Vince McMahon's humor is not there. So I think it's been way better.
Well, he's got, and I do take into account he's in his mid-50s, but he's got a slightly closer touch on what's kind of contemporary, both in like pop culture and in tone and the way people watch and things like that. And it's just having that sort of like almost Carney-like aspect of it, which never really lined up with the glamour and glitz, to be honest. But without Vince, that Carney aspect of it is kind of gone, or at least greatly reduced. And you can kind of just sit back and be like, okay, I don't have to worry about this as much, It's just less stressful.
Well, Vince always had the tendency to do like a silly skit that like made you feel bad to be a wrestling fan. You know, like case in point, like I think Jim Ross got a colonoscopy in a sketch once. Was it May? Yeah, Mae Young gave birth to a hand.
Yeah.
Then 15 years later, they did a segment where that hand was a teenager. That's actually that. Like, okay, give Vince credit. Sometimes that's pretty funny.
He was playing the long game on that one. You know that the 15 years in between, he was just thinking about it.
The other aspect of the TKO, the creation of the TKO company, the merger of UFC and WWE, is when they did the sale, it was in the contract that Vince McMahon is basically, you are the king of WWE for as long as you want. Then, like a couple of months later, they announced that Vince had nothing to do with creative at all anymore. But like they announced it a couple of months later. I was telling you like a few weeks later, I was like, I don't think Vince is on this show at all. This is a Triple H show. You got like, you know, it was pretty quick after the sale. They were like, that, you know, like, so something happened in a very short window of time, and we don't know exactly what, and I'd really like to know what.
That's an interesting aspect of it too, because I found that the whole thing happened very quickly. It felt like
what, the sale?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, the sale, the whole idea of selling it to Endeavor. Well, I don't know this. Only Vince knows this. Only Vince and Ari Emanuel know this. But like, do you think maybe it was around January and Vince was like, hey, I'm going to work myself back in. Would you buy this thing? And we put in the contract that I run it for life? Sure. Yeah. You know, do I think that happened? I think there's
literally a conversation that supervillains have had.
Yeah.
Like, word for word. There's been a comic book somewhere.
When you look at TKO, and I don't really know anything about Ari Emanuel, so I don't want to include him in this, but I'm going to include him in this. They do look like a bunch of evil supervillains. Dana White's got his shaved head and like
he's the bruiser.
Yeah. Vince McMahon has a pencil thin mustache and
dapper gentleman.
He's the more like diabolic villain, whereas Dana White's the muscle. And Ari Emanuel's the money. He's the power. Like these fuckers, they are cartoon supervillains. This isn't real life.
It is the reverse Avengers.
You know what I was saying to someone, I was like, if Vince McMahon retired, like actually retired when he said he retired, and then made a deal with Sacha Baron Cohen, where Sacha Baron Cohen could like adopt Vince, this new Vince with a mustache as a character and go lead his life. Like say like Sacha Baron Cohen was like, Vince, I'll give $100 million. I don't know why. Borat made a lot of money. Maybe he hasn't. Can I just be you for 2 years? God damn, pal. Sounds pretty good. I don't know. Like something weird's going on. They are TKO Group Holdings is a bunch of supervillains.
Yes.
But
they know how to make good fight stuff.
They do. So I will give them money, unfortunately.
Credit where credit is due.